and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
To Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. A lot of news surrounding the whole 2016 election with Donald Trump's campaign manager being arrested. I still think it's all a circus, every bit of it. We've gotten to a point where a lot of people are just looking at the whole election and going, how did it get to this point? It's so much a circus. It's so much a corrupt thing in the first place. Why are we even participating? And a lot of people are coming. You see all the news about all the Trump supporters, and you aren't seeing the news about all the people who are like, this is just stupid. It's really gotten to that point. I've talked to a lot of people, and they're just like, this whole thing's just idiotic to even get off the couch, because no matter who you're voting for, you're just voting for the same shit. It really comes down to that. Because no matter who we end up with, they're all basically calling for more government powers, more unconstitutional powers. And it really amazes me to see certain people supporting certain candidates. It really amazes me that they're either extremely naive or they know a hell of a lot more than the rest of us. But if you're trying to actually win someone that might see the corruption, understand individual freedoms, you're probably not going to do it with any of these candidates. And really, what will they change? Because we still have Congress full of idiots. Our whole federal government system is full of people that don't give a damn about you. And then I got a Ron Paul Liberty report here. No matter how you vote, the insiders decide. And it really just plays into the corruption of our federal government. Here we go.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is co-host Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Very good. Guess what we're going to talk about today? The election. Everybody wants to talk about election, but in a different fashion. we're not going to talk in particular about any one candidate and what they believe in, because I can't figure out what they believe in, and most of them are untrustworthy. But what I want to concentrate on is a little bit about the process, the rules, and are these fair elections that we're talking about? How important are the Republican rules? How important are the super delegates? But first off, do you feel comfortable with the way our elections are run? Do you go away saying, it's great, we're setting a grand example for the world on how to run elections?
It's funny, in a previous life, I was an election monitor overseas.
Ooh.
And I remember how we used to go in and we'd meet with the Electoral Commission. We would learn all the rules down to the finest detail. And, if these things were not on the up and up, they were criticized. They were said to be bad elections and everything. And our elections would never pass muster according to our own rules, I don't think.
Yeah, that's a big thing. But, on the weekend there were some primaries, and Bernie won several, and they say he has some momentum. But then the subject came up about super delegates. I guess if you're a super candidate and you're very close to the establishment, the super delegates go to where the party directs them, and they direct them some way. And evidently Hillary has that lined up. So regardless of what Sanders does, it's going to be decided elsewhere. But the same way, the Republicans don't have the super delegates, but they have super control over the rules. And I remember the rules being changed a little bit 4 years ago. But yeah, this is what they rely on. But I don't see how the people can be so confident and just love this and say and find these technicalities. What are the negatives? What are the positives? What does he say? What does he say? When the real power structure behind these elections is how these elections are managed. And over the years, I have become rather cynical about how elections are run.
It's interesting. I think the media chooses to focus on the sporting event aspect of the race. He's got 400 and she's got 300 or what have you. But maybe it's to divert our attention from the fact that, as you point out, there seems to be something fundamentally unfair about the way presidents are chosen. The superdelegates, we saw a piece today on Zero Hedge that pointed out that if the superdelegates, who are people who were appointed, they never were voted for, if Sanders had simply gotten the superdelegates that Hillary just inherited somehow out of the sky, they would be telling her to drop out because she'd be so far behind. So the vote of the people for Sanders or Clinton has meant nothing at all in the race.
Yeah, but, you're talking about not being elected and getting into a special slot is how do we pick our vice presidents? We go through all this, and there's a lot of shenanigans goes on. Then we finally have our nominees, and then we say, Mr. Nominee, who's your choice for vice president? Of course, there's a lot of maneuvering behind the scenes, but it literally gets down to the nominee making this choice. And I think back at Reagan, and, people were excited about Reagan, the independent conservative, really cracked down on big government. And a lot of people then wrote him off because he immediately picked somebody from the establishment, which is H.W. Bush, who became president later on, just merely by making that decision. So a lot happened. So I think it's a weak case for the democratic elections. Of course, democracy per se is nothing that the founders gave us, but they at least endorse the idea that votes should be counted and you should have elections and the democratic process should be respected to some degree. But I don't see how too many people could get very excited about it. I've complained so often about us killing people and then going in and saying, well, you're not like us. You don't have elections, and we'll bomb you, and we'll do this. And by golly, they have elections. But then they end up with somebody we don't like, and we do something to get rid of them. At the same time, here in this country, it's hard to get on ballots. This idea that there's a two-party system, I think is wrong. But where the disconnect for me comes is if you had a truly free society, I think the parties would be very private. And they could have their rules and they could do whatever they want. And they say, okay, this is a convention or what? This is what we're doing. But we don't have it. We have, parties that are ordained by the government. The government laws are mixed up on funding and everything else. Take, for instance, if we're involved in the Libertarian Party and somebody happened to have been picked that the next day a serious crime was committed and all that, well, we don't want him for our nominee, they would have the right to use their rules to remove one person and put him in. But under today's circumstances, it's government and political parties, and then you put in the mesh, the media. And the media is involved in this. And then the other interesting factor that interferes with elections will be the deep state, the shadow government. And that's the part that is the one that's kept most secret. So I think if things get tough and conditions are bad and they have to keep the people in real ignorance, it's great to have this great personality fight going on, because certainly we don't want to talk about real issues. And then we end up, I think, with the mess that we have today, where elections are pretty irrelevant, and it brings out the worst in people, because I do believe that power is very corrupting. And the founders, of course, suggested we not even have political parties, but you're always going to have political factions. And it's a very good case for me to argue that centralized government is the worst kind. Little local government, the more local, the better, the more states power you have. But this whole idea that you have somebody at the national level, with so much power being controlled by the deep state and the shadow government, that's where I see the problem.
It's interesting. I was on a show last week with a Hillary Clinton supporter, and I mentioned what I felt was a fundamental unfairness of the superdelegate system. And he was kind of a rash, harsh guy, and he said, yeah, well, I bet the Republicans wish they had something like that. I said, yeah, they probably do. I don't disagree with you, but they do have their own, and you touched on it earlier, which is how they use the rules and they manipulate the rules. And this is something you know well, the infamous Rule 40B back in 2012.
Yes, and I was never naive. I knew it was an uphill race, and I had my motives and all this. But we actually were doing a lot better than I ever dreamed, because we started winning some of these states, and we were coming out. You take, for instance, when the dust settled, we totally won the caucus from Iowa. From Iowa, but it was never recognized because there were couple other winners that were before me, but when they counted the votes and divvied up the delegates, we overwhelmingly, more than 3/4 of the delegates were Ron Paul delegates. But they saw this coming, and they're just terrified of competition, because we were worrying about whether we had 5, 6, 7, or 8 states in that category, so the numbers weren't good. But they could not tolerate the idea that I would get on that stage and start talking about war, anti-war, or talking about the Fed and talking about how stupid the Republicans are and the way they spend money and how hypocritical. There was no way they were going to let that happen. So we qualified. You had to have plurality in 5 states. So our guys were aggressive. We did whatever we could, and we had the votes. And of course, if you see the replays of Boehner closing down some votes on the rule changes, boom, and even the yeas and the nays, I was surprised that the nays, which were our votes not to accept the new rules, they were pretty good, and that's when things got pretty rough. But they went and changed it to we needed not just 5 but 8, and it had to be majority. So it was a big change at the last minute. And the whole thing was, just don't let that guy say anything, because we're terrified of somebody who might talk about ideas, and we have to talk about junk. And that's what they do so far. And you think it's junkier now than ever before. I mean, just look at the discussions going on.
So they didn't want you to be kept from the nomination because they were afraid you would win, because they felt like they had that in the bag. They were afraid that you'd be able to open your mouth on the stage if you were nominated.
That was the main thing. But there were some, I was surprised at the response there. There were a lot of people very sympathetic. And just like now, they talk about delegates who aren't fully committed and they can change. And that's why the Republicans are anxious to put another name up. But the irony of all this is the Ron Paul rule is is prohibiting them from doing that. So it's backfiring on them. But and well, can't they change it? Sure, they can change it, but there's a political consequence on that. At the last minute, changing back, and Trump's not going to go away quietly. And then they have the threat of him going third party.
And of course, your run has popularized this idea of the rules. I don't think a lot of people paid a lot of attention before that, but now that the cat's out of the bag, they have to be a little bit more cautious and circumspect about it. But I've always wanted to ask you this. They didn't want you to speak at the convention, but did they offer you some kind of a deal if you let us write your speech, or if you?
Oh yeah, they would. It was never official, nothing in writing, and nothing from the top. It filtered over, and they said, you can have a speech, and I said, yeah, what do I do? I said, can I just get up and give a speech? No, we'd have to approve the speech. Then the other thing they offered me, which was really like offering me what? They said, Romney would like you to sit in the box with him during the convention. I said, you want me to be a prop? So that's the way it worked. But they still they're in a different world, And if you're dealing with ideas and you really believe in them and you stick to them, they have trouble dealing with a person like that. So, but
it's interesting. Sorry to interrupt you. I was going to say you put two things. But putting them together is even more interesting. You talked about how Reagan was considered a maverick, and he came in, and they put Bush there to maybe to calm him down. And then you talk about the deep state. But Bush, in my opinion, was the epitome of the deep state. CIA director, former U.S. ambassador to China. So he wasn't just an establishment guy. He was the deep state.
Yeah, but I remember back then, if anybody objected about the Northeastern establishment or something like that, they say, oh, you must be a John Bircher or something like that. They wanted to just write you off as some conspiracy person. But there were people who complained about it and knew about it, and it really was the case. It was moving it on. But it does raise the question about the deep state. How do they manage all this? And I think there's a tremendous collusion between, the military, the financing of the military. I think our CIA is a big deal. I think they're the ones who orchestrate these other elections and the wars that go on. And I think they're over and above the president. I don't think the president has full control of the CIA, and then they certainly can't keep up with all the finances of the world. And what is so weird is we use these tools, and we can take a country that did not, attack us, but we want to punish them, and that's Iran. And take in $150 billion and freeze that money. And then it's twisted around as we finally break the ice and try to live with them again. Oh, why are we giving them our money?
Our money.
This American people's money. And you still hear that in the campaign.
Nobody corrects it.
No, and the media doesn't do it.
But you mentioned this before the show, and I think it's a great point that we do know that the CIA manipulates elections overseas. There's a history of it going way back to the 50s and before. We know that's a fact. And so you're saying, well, so what's this to say that they're not involved somehow here in some way or the other?
I remember a long time ago when I was first in office in the 70s, I was communicating with a gentleman. He wrote for the magazines for the Birch Society, but he did not belong to the John Birch Society, but he had been in the FBI, and he was part of the FBI to help set up the CIA after World War II. And I brought up the subject of the CIA. He had some stories to tell me about that. But the one thing that stuck with me, he says, if you have a republic and you want a Republican, not a Republican Party, if you want to have a republic type of government, you cannot have a CIA because they will run the show, they will be secret, they will deny, and they will be more powerful than the elected leader. So the elections, I believe, are just fluff. And I believe the media, there's a big fight between Fox and MSNBC, but is there a big fight on, is one calling for bringing the troops home from the Middle East? Did any of them stand up against the war? Sometimes they seem to compete on who's the most hawkish. And of course, the candidates are the most hawkish. But the Democrats, they're not supposed to be hawkish, so they pretend. But then all of a sudden, if people still don't believe this, that some neocons wouldn't be all that unhappy with Hillary, because of her hawkish foreign policy. She could run. She could, if she didn't have the labels tagged to her. With her policy, she actually could run as a Republican.
In some ways, she's a perfect candidate for the neocons because not only is she very aggressive in foreign policy, but she's very much tied in with the money establishment, with the Goldman Sachs, with the financial establishment. So putting the two of them together, you have a perfect mix. But, I was looking before, I think there were some comments on Zero Hedge, and someone pointed out that the Clintons have been either in power or running for power for almost a third of a decade.
Yeah. So you're inferring that Clinton is close to Goldman Sachs. Does that mean that none of the Republican candidates are involved with Goldman Sachs? Yeah. Well, one thing for certain, the American people are unhappy. They're angry and they're justified for financial reasons, for foreign policy reasons, for personal liberty reasons. But they cannot be distracted by elections. This election has so little to do with real issues. And they need to read about the shadow government and the deep state and who really runs things and how the finances work and how the IMF works and how the bailouts work. And that's where the real power is. But the only thing I see that compensates for that is not having a greater force that can overcome them. The only force that can overcome them is a better idea. So it's ideological. We have to convince the American people that liberty is the answer, and you have to challenge the power of government, and that means the whole goal would be what the founders tried to do, and that is strictly limit the power of a central government. And it has failed totally. And not only have we a powerful central government, then we have another layer above this, and that is the deep state and the shadow government. And I think it's going to come an end because it won't function, because they believe that they can spend money endlessly and never save money, and they can tax endlessly and keep printing money. And it's failing, and that's why people are very unhappy. So this bickering going back and forth doesn't address the subject of the economic and the foreign policies that we have, but there's the opportunity there because this is coming down, and the American people need to wake up and find out what they can do. It's an ideological struggle. The ideas are out there. The understanding is there. We just need to have the leadership in this country reverse from the Keynesian interventionist authoritarian approach to one that we accept, liberty and voluntarism. That, to me, would be the answer. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.
Okay, Ron Paul Liberty Report, Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube, and RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Check them out. Subscribe on YouTube. Now, he basically got into what I was saying. It's a big circus now, and we even talked about this when it came to Ron Paul himself when he was running, that if he was to get elected, he was to become president, how much would he actually be able to do? And if he tried to do anything substantial, would he be able to survive it? Because the deep state probably wouldn't let something like that fly. Many people think that's what happened to Kennedy. You actually try to turn the country around, and that's it. Now, I think that if cards are played correctly, you can make baby steps to allow for doors to open a little bit more for others to get a chance at freedom, but you can't make a substantial change. And when we look at the circus of the election this cycle, it really is a circus. It's there is actual, brawls and fights going on, and no real talk about actual solutions. And they put out their talking points about what they're going to do. Yes, but they can't stand up there and have an intellectual conversation about it. Trump won't. He just plays off of everybody's emotions. Then you have, the rest of them just playing off of what he's saying and bashing him or bashing other candidates. And I think that's why maybe Rand Paul decided to drop out. He said, I can't play the circus game. If we're going to have actual intellectual conversations and debates up here, I can do that. But it did become a circus. And the media played their part in that. Kind of like what Ron Paul was saying. They don't want people up there talking about real issues. Why do they like Bernie Sanders? Because he's a socialist. He's not talking about personal freedoms. He's talking about equality through the state. Equality through the state means everybody's a servant. Servitude. That's how the state makes people equal, is servitude. And they're already doing it. Property tax. You can't own property and then go, well, I paid off my property, I got my house, I can sustain, electric bill with bartering with people, and well, no, you got property tax on top of that. And then, the city usually likes to expand their utilities. So now you're dependent on them. And a lot of times when I see cities expand utilities, they also come in and basically put ordinances in that prevent you from having well or septic. One of the two. So you have to be dependent on them. Basically, they force people to work to keep what they have. Not to get more, to keep what they have. And a lot of times, that's not successful. It's just a scheme, and this whole political system, I think, will eventually come crumbling down under its own weight, because it is trying to play a pretty screwed up, psychological game on people, and I think it's starting to wear off. And then people were talking about Paul Ryan when he became Speaker of the House, and how he was just an urbaner, and I said the same. I have one here from VanityFair.com. Is Paul Ryan prepared to commit political suicide? Okay. And it says here, a few minutes ago, I happened to review the U.S. budget and observed that we could go from deficits to surplus by simply eliminating all social safety net programs, including Medicaid. They plan on printing these papers out, naming the plan something August-like Rise to Opportunity, and sending it to David Brooks with the hope that he'll subsequently call it the most courageous budget reform proposal any of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. But if he doesn't, I guess Paul Ryan will remain Washington's favorite man of ideas. Because Ryan is so beloved by many inside the Beltway, some are suggesting that he parachute into a contested Republican convention, one in which Donald Trump fails to win the 1,237 delegates required on the first vote and become the party's nominee. If we don't have a nominee who can win on the first ballot, I'm for none of the above, said Ryan's predecessor, former House Speaker John Boehner. A couple of weeks ago, I'm for Paul Ryan to be our nominee. Sure, Americans seem to be flirting with populism, but maybe what they really want deep down is upper income tax cuts, Social Security private accounts, and more immigration. Add to that Ryan's patented smile frown of humble empathy, and he handily beats Hillary Clinton. It all makes sense. There are signs that Ryan is open to being drafted. He didn't mind the idea of being vice president back in 2012, so maybe he wouldn't mind the idea of being president today. He has shaved his beard, quieting suspicion of a secret fealty to Islam. Excuse me. He represents the opposite of Trump on many policy fronts like trade, immigration, and foreign policy. Yes, he has denied interest in the nomination. While I'm grateful for the encouragement I received, I will not be a candidate. He has averred, but oh, sorry, that quote is from last October. It's what Ryan said about becoming Speaker of the House about 3 weeks before becoming Speaker of the House. More recently, he hasn't ruled it out, first telling CNBC, "We'll see, who knows," and then trying to backpedal by telling people to knock it off, perhaps while baiting at the air coyly. Ryan is also doing plenty behind the scenes, including taking a trip to Utah a few days before Mitt Romney gave a speech there denouncing Donald Trump. You can read the rest of that at Vanity Fair. It's a little bit of an article. Okay. Now, I kind of want to get out of the whole political news here for a little bit when it comes to presidents. Because, again, I think where we need to focus are our local levels. First, your local government, then your state. When we get all that together, maybe it won't matter so much about the federal. Now, I do want to talk about a federal agency that has been running amok and doing the government's bidding for them. And then this out of natural news, a little bit of encouraging news, at least for the Blackfoot Native American Nation. Here out of natural news, corrupt Bureau of Land Management successfully kicked out of the sacred Blackfoot Native American Nation. It's one of the few victories for the people against an out-of-control federal agency that is growing more lawless and arrogant by the year. As reported by Indian Country Today, the Bureau of Land Management, which falls under the Department of the Interior, as does the Bureau of Indian Affairs, was forced to cancel an oil and gas lease. Again, they do this all the time. Take land and then lease it out to a company. In the Badger 2 Medicine region in northwestern Montana earlier this month, thereby keeping land that is culturally and traditionally sacred to members of Blackfoot Nation pristine. It's a very historic day for the Blackfeet, said John Murray, the Blackfeet Nation's Historic Preservation Officer in the Indian Country Today reported. Interior Secretary Sally Jewell, in a statement announcing the decision, said that it was the correct action to take on behalf of the tribe and its future members. Today's actions honors Badger 2 Medicine's rich cultural and natural resources and recognizes that irreparable impacts that oil and gas development would have on them, Jewell said. Next part of this article, decision ends all legal wrangling, which I think was one of the big things. They don't want decisions because then it sets precedent. So they always try to avoid those. But here it says Indian Country Today reported further the 130,000-acre Badger Two Medicine region, part of the Lewis and Clark National Forest, is wedged between Glacier National Park, the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and Blackfeet Indian Reservation. The area is historically, culturally, and spiritually significant to Blackfeet tribe and is part of a recognized traditional cultural district. Characteristics that caused Congress to legislatively withdraw the area from mineral development in 2006. It's not a wilderness, said Mary. It's a living Blackfeet landscape. The BLM had issued a 6,200-acre oil and gas lease to Solonex of Louisiana under the Interior Secretary James Watt in 1982, but operations have been in limbo since 1985. BLM since determined that the lease was not properly issued because it violated the National Environmental Policy Act and the National Historic Preservation Act. The department said Jewell's decision came after carefully examining the record and following consultations with the U.S. Forest Service and Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, the Blackfeet tribe, the leaseholding company, and other concerned parties. A number of ethnographic studies and one archaeological study have been done on the tract of land. The BLM decision ends legal attempts by the Mountain States Legal Foundation, which was litigating on behalf of Solonex in challenging the Interior Department's now November 23 decision to cancel the lease. Every single one of the originally issued leases to the region have undergone a plethora of administrative, legal, and legislative action since they were handed down more than 3 decades ago due to significance of the Badger Two Medicine region and over concerns about circumstances that led to the lease ensuance. And again, you can read the rest of that at Natural News. Give me a second here. Okay. So, that's one success against BLM, but there was a lot that played into that to make that possible. And I think that it's much harder for the rest of us because, you can't claim that type of status. You can't. There's so much that plays into it that they do not look at us the same. We can't get people behind the everyday person. We have one thing, though, that did come out of Infowars.com that I've seen. Bill introduced in House to strip BLM of police powers, meaning they would have to rely on the local police, which I think they would go to the state police because they would have better success than the sheriff, but then the sheriff can still intervene to an extent. Okay. It says here, a Republican in the House of Representatives has introduced a bill calling for the termination of Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management law enforcement functions. The legislation set to become law on September 30th, 2017, if passed by Congress, will close down the BLM Office of Law Enforcement. H.R. 4751 applies to land the federal government claims to own within the states, specifically The law covers land within the National Forest System, including national grasslands and public lands defined by the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976, a law that eliminated homesteading in the United States by repealing the pre-existing Homestead Acts. The legislation was referred to the Committee on Natural Resources and the Committee on Agricultural earlier this month. Quote, I've long been a proponent of shifting federal powers and functions to state and local governments where they rightfully belong, said Utah Governor Gary Herbert. After the bill was introduced by the Utah congressional delegation, the Law Enforcement for Local Lands Act does just that. It will provide block grants to states that allow local law enforcement to take the appropriate lead role in enforcing the law. I strongly urge Congress to pass this legislation. Federal agencies do not enjoy the same level of trust and respect as local law enforcement that are deeply rooted in the local communities. This legislation will help de-escalate conflicts between law enforcement and local residents while improving transparency and accountability. The BLM and U.S. Forest Service will be able to focus on their core missions without distraction of police functions. This is a win all around, said Representative Jason Chaffetz, I don't know how to pronounce that, and other members of the Utah congressional delegation in a statement. Constitution limits land owned by feds. The federal government is not authorized to own land. The Constitution restricts the feds to establishing forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings, and reserves for the states the right to own land. Our founding fathers specifically restricted what land the federal government could own, explains the Constitutional Concepts Foundation. Even then, the federal government had to purchase the land from the state with the approval of the state legislature. Further, the Constitution stipulates that all new states will become members of the Union on an equal footing with all other states. This is not true of the western states, where the vast majority of the land within the boundaries of the state was simply taken by the federal government. H.R. 4751 arrived following the Bunada overgrazing rights and the occupation of the Muller National Wildlife Refuge outside of Burns, Oregon. After the occupation and the Nevada standoff, the feds handed down 36 indictments and arrested protest participants. Cattle rancher Robert Lavoy Finnegan was shot to death by the FBI during the occupation in Oregon. That was from Infowars.com, titled Bill Introduced in House to Strip BLM of Police Powers. Okay. So we have the Blackfoot Nation being able to fight back against the BLM and the leases for oil and gas on their land. And we also have a bill introduced in the House to strip BLM of police powers. I don't know how far that stuff is going to go, but we're just going to have to wait and watch and hope. It's one of those things that I don't have a whole bunch of hope for it, but, you know, we'll see. Okay, give me a second here. Okay. Now, why do a lot of people accept all this? Well, one, it doesn't affect a lot of people. Why doesn't it affect people? A lot of it has to do with the media, TV, the manipulation of what you know and see. So people that are tuned into mainstream and go along with the trends of thinking, because really thinking has become a trend. TV can manipulate you, but it really is only effective to a certain portion of society. But what's also effective is if they can get that portion of society to go along with what they're seeing and, hearing. You also have another portion of society that wants to fit in with the new trends. And if the people saying the new trends are getting what they see off of TV, they go buy it, becomes a new trend. Even the people that aren't maybe easily manipulated by that, they might be pretty well manipulated by people around them. So it really becomes a chain effect. We Are Change put out one. We Are Change.org. We Are Change on YouTube. This one titled, What You Need to Know About the Government and Manipulating You Through Social Media.
With information moving at the speed of light, humanity is able to see the truth about the world faster and quicker than ever before throughout history. But there is a dark side to this new day and age of information. And in this video, we're going to tell you how the powers that be, the governments, the corporate controllers, the very people on top are using this as a way to control and manipulate you. Obviously, we know many people have moved away from television and are getting most of their information and news from the internet. We know that people are losing attention spans on the television mainly because it is so full of manipulation, propaganda, and full all-out crap. We even had a top journalist, Dr. Rudolf Uthtek, in Germany, who said that everything you see on the mainstream media on television is completely fake. He went on public television stating that he was forced to publish the works of intelligence agents under his name, also adding that non-compliance with these orders would result with him losing his job. With television and the mainstream media failing, everyone is going online, and of course that powers that be know about this, and they are manipulating you online. It is just being revealed. We have been talking about this for a number of years now, but it's finally being revealed by some news sources that the United States has spy operations that manipulate social media. The federal government is hiring internet trolls to monitor and correct online discussion. When they mean correct, they mean utterly lie to you and discourage any kind of critical thinking and accountability that would make them actually do the job that they're supposed to do. And this is the information that is just coming out right now with CIA agents to troll alternative media sites in huge propaganda program. This program existed before, and they are expanding it right now in order to influence not only mainstream media outlets to promote fake propaganda stories, but by having agents troll internet forums, social media, and website comment sections in an effort to disrupt alternative media sites. This has been in play for a very, very long time, and now it is being expanded to a massive level, and we will explain why in just a few moments. Now, the U.S. government, we were reporting on this back in 2011 because we saw how the U.S. government was actually offering private intelligence companies contracts to create software in order to manage fake people on social media sites. And ever since then, the United States military handed out $2.76 million in a contract to a California company named Nipriprid to develop software to manipulate social media networks with fake accounts that would spread American propaganda. This blueprint was actually started by Cass Sunstein, Obama's former information czar, who wrote the white paper on how to infiltrate and stop people with alternative views. He wrote the white paper pretty much detailing how government agents need to be online trolling people who want a new investigation of 9/11, who want accountability from our very government, people who raise things that are against the status quo. The government needs to send in agents in order to disrupt what they're saying online and lie and manipulate in order to discourage the discourse. He also advocated for specifically having government agents infiltrate real life groups. You have to see this video. It's in the description below. I asked him, how dare he even believe in this? And the response he gave me was utterly shocking. This video, again, will be in the description below. But as we know, it's not only to disrupt the dialogue that's happening on the forums, on social networks, in the comment sections, discouraging any critical thinking. It's also a program where government agencies target individuals that have not committed any crime to destroy their reputation, to infiltrate the political communities, to develop techniques to manipulate online discourse. And they're doing all of this with no public knowledge or accountability, and it is not justified in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, discourse brings a better discussion to a greater truth. It helps people understand the situation and find solutions. What the government is doing is writing a blank check for their corruption, for their misdeeds, in order to be more criminal. They already are extremely criminal. Right now, another way that the internet is being manipulated is that every high-profile U.S. terror plot that the U.S. government said that they have disrupted was actually created by the very agency. They are entrapping people, setting them up, and they are making up these terror plots using dummies as a way to fall into their trap and doing everything under sting operations and manipulating people, setting them in jail for the rest of their lives. We have to understand the term conspiracy theory, which Cass Sunstein was using as a way to justify the spying, the infiltrating, the cognitive dissonance against political speech, was actually created by the CIA after the JFK assassination in order to debunk alternative views that threaten the establishment. This is a well-known truth, and as we know, that's the major power that the government has. They are censoring any important online discourse with social media, and this is a huge power that they have. Even a Harvard law professor recently, Jonathan Zitran, has explored on how Google and Facebook alone could influence an election by customizing search results of news and swinging undecided voters to one side or another. The power of the internet is vast, is huge, and the powers that be are using this as a way to get rid of any critical thinking, any alternative view. Anyone who goes against the status quo will have government agents using tax dollars in order to troll them, in order to manipulate people, in order to show people that there aren't enough people waking up. Let me tell you this. This is the most important news that you guys need to understand. People around the world, and I've known this because I've been all around the world and I've been meeting people everywhere, are waking up to the lie that government is. They are waking up to the corporate destruction that's happening to our environment, to our planet. They are waking up every single day in larger numbers than before, and the government sees this as a threat, and that's why they're pulling all the stops right now, expanding their domestic spying program, expanding their discourse program, expanding their trolls online, because they want you to feel alone. They want you to feel sad and depressed, to make you believe that there's no one else out there who thinks critically, who questions government. But guess what? That is the biggest lie, and that's what's going to take them down. Share this video with your friend. If you're interested in doing what I'm doing, check out Change Media University, a full online journalism program where you could take part, where you could get involved, and you could actually be the change you want to see in this world and start making progress and change in this world by being the media that you want to see in this world. Thank you for supporting.
WeAreChange.org. We Are Change on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, we've known about the term conspiracy theory and, you know, how it came to be. But we're also getting to a point where social media is so fake anymore. whether it just be people with multiple accounts that troll, operatives with multiple accounts that troll. It's not what it used to be, and people are finding alternatives. A lot of it's coming from smartphone and private messaging apps, a lot of encryption. Facebook and all that, it's really not anything anymore. People that really believe it are the easily manipulated people, I believe. Some of us have our news feeds and we go through that. But I'm talking about the people that are so involved in Facebook where that becomes, their other room of the house. It really does, because they lose themselves in it. They see what their friends post. Their friends are so into it. It becomes a competition. No one's really showing their true life. And, we all have complications in our lives, and you're trying to compete with a fallacy, because that is not reality that you're seeing that from that other person. I don't go on Facebook and cry about everything or, make my life, completely public. Some people do that, and they go on there looking for sympathy. Other people are competing to make themselves look better. But none of it really is the full picture. And I think that's why I think I'm actually starting to see more people wanting to socially interact in person rather than on the internet. And I hope that becomes more, because we learn a hell of a lot more about each other when we're around each other. And sometimes it getting to know someone opens up a whole new, section of your life that you might have not gotten if you were at home on your social media app. But when we are on social media, I don't think things like Facebook, I think messaging is one of the better things. So you got these messaging apps where it's encrypted, so it's private. They're not storing all your messages, and it becomes a thing where you're interacting with each other when you can't be hanging out. So it's one of those things that there's a lot of good things, there's a lot of bad things on the internet, and you really have to be smart enough just to navigate it and really weed out the BS. And again, it really comes down to the individual being very, very dedicated to looking at all sides of issues and points and making their own decision. And a lot of it comes down to your own morality. Okay. Let me get this up here. I had one here from truthinmedia.com. Okay, give me a second here. Try to get this going on. Maybe not. Cool. Okay. A little bit more good news. Truthinmedia.com. Judge dismisses felony charge against jury nullification activists. Mecosta Circuit Judge Kimberly Bower dismissed a felony charge on Wednesday against former pastor Keith Wood, who had been arrested in 2015 for handing out flyers promoting jury nullification outside of a Michigan courthouse. Wood still faces a misdemeanor jury tampering charge, which hopefully that gets thrown out too. It says here, according to MLive, Judge Bower, however, is allowing a misdemeanor jury tampering charge to move forward. 39-year-old Wood had been arrested on both charges in November of 2015 while handing out flyers promoting the concept of jury nullification outside of a Michigan courthouse. Jury nullification is a term that describes scenarios in which a jury refuses to convict a guilty defendant under the rationale that the law itself is unjust or inappropriate applied. Wood is facing charges for handing out flyers produced by the Fully Informed Jury Association, which argue that jury nullification is a right belonging to jurors, which it is. Prosecutor Brian Thede alleges that Wood chose to hand out flyers that day to target potential jurors in a land use case against an Amish man. Wood TV is reporting that Wood admits to knowing the man, who later pleaded guilty to charges but denies that he was trying to reach jurors in that case. I'm convinced the rest of the case will be dismissed based on First Amendment rights, said Wood's attorney David Coleman. Thede claims that Wood's behavior erodes the rule of law and could lead to a future in which juries set violent criminals free if they believe in the motives behind their attacks. And certainly if we were to allow Mr. Wood's conduct here, we could have every trial stopped, Thede said in court, according to Fox 17 West Michigan. Now let's go back to Thede claims that Wood's behavior erodes the rule of law. The rule of law says that juries should be informed about that, and could lead to a future in which juries set violent criminals free if they believe the motives behind their attacks. Okay, violent criminals. Well, you call people that you arrest for let's say they had to shoot someone. They shot someone. You arrest someone for shooting someone. Potential violent criminal. But what if the jury goes, well, yeah, maybe he wasn't supposed to fire his gun there, but he had the right to defend himself against someone that might have been attacking him. Let's say a city has a law that is denying the right for people to carry a firearm, own a firearm, and someone legally purchased a firearm in a different city in that state. They were in that state and someone attacked them. A jury should be able to do jury nullification if they felt, the law that says that we aren't allowed to defend ourselves against actual violent criminals. So you see where jury nullification comes into play, where it's very important. And I'm sorry, you're probably not going to have a jury that looks at and going, yeah, that drug dealer shot that other guy because he didn't give him his $20. I like that. No, it's not going to happen that way. Judge Bower ordered the court to return a $15,000 bond deposit that Wood had paid pursuant to the felony obstruction of justice charge. The felony obstruction of justice charge would have involved a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison, and the misdemeanor jury tampering charge carries a maximum penalty of 1 year in jail. Again, that was from truthandmedia.com. Go check them out. But, we've seen this where people that have been trying to spread the information out about, jury nullification have been targeted. A lot of their cases always do get dropped, but they do get them out of that area while jurors potentially could be going in and out of there. It's pretty funny how they can randomly just target and then drop the charges because they know they won't stick. Not a big fan of Michigan, not a big fan. They're right north of me, and they pretty screwed up there. Then I got Illinois to the left of me. They're pretty screwed up too. Ohio to the right of me, they're a little screwed up, not quite as bad as Illinois and Michigan. Indiana's got its screwed up things where you have Republicans trying to incite problems in the state. We had the one with the religious freedom, Indiana, and their religious freedom thing, saying, oh, you could deny someone service because of your religious beliefs if you're a store owner. And like I said this on this program before, that was never needed. Absolutely never needed. You do not need something like that in Indiana. Because Indiana is already a right to deny state. Basically, you can ask someone to leave your establishment. You just don't give them any reason, basically. Just you're denying them service. You don't have to serve people. People get disruptive. You can kick them out of your business here. Indiana's been like that. So you didn't need that. That was to incite problem. They wanted the conflict from that. Then there was another one just recent that they were putting forth, and it's like, oh, yeah, you don't need that one either because of our state. It's like Indiana is also a right to fire state. You have the right to fire someone. You don't really have to give a reason. This doesn't say that they can't come back and try to sue you, but they got to prove it. So you would have to be doing something discriminatory. Okay, I had one last clip I wanted to play. I can find it here. Okay. From AMTV, Indoctrination of the Masses Explained.
Visit our sponsor, American Survival Wholesale, right now. Affordable, long-term, storable food. Christian, veteran-owned and operated. American Survival Wholesale provides food storage and survival products for you and your family. Get custom food packs, 3, 6, and 12 months. Pay-as-you-go food packs, survival products, organic foods, and a 15-minute consult free of charge. Food packs as low as 50 cents per serving, gluten and GMO-free. Based on a 2,000 calorie per day diet. Part of all sales proceeds go to support our veterans, the Veteran Outreach Program, and Bible Drive for those in need. Call American Survival Wholesale today at 818-720-0759. That's 818-720-0759. Because the world isn't getting any safer. That's American Survival Wholesale. Worship, restoration, revival. Call now or click the link below. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green, and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. It is Tuesday, March 29th, 2016. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about the indoctrination of the masses. But first, Trump's campaign manager, Lewandowski, was charged with battery. Really going after the Trumpster, aren't they? Florida police have charged Donald Trump's campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, with simple assault in connection with an incident earlier this month involving a reporter. I believe she was from Breitbart. So they were really going after Donald Trump for a reason. In fact, there was another major headline article on CNN and also CNBC, really across the mainstream media today. And this all ties into the indoctrination of the masses, talking about all the failed businesses of Donald Trump. His casinos, his real estate, Macy's, all these things, putting a big spotlight and focus on all the failures that Donald Trump has had in his life, even though he's a billionaire, even though he's massively successful. But because of the indoctrination of the masses, the mainstream bullshit, liberalized media, companies like CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News, even though they say they're on the conservative side, even though they're really not, they're a part of the same smorgasbord that makes up the propaganda George Orwell machine that is our society today. Again, it's all about indoctrination, is working against Donald Trump to paint the picture that somehow this guy hasn't been successful in his past and won't be successful running as president of the United States and commanding our great country. You see, if you're not indoctrinated into that smorgasbord that makes up the bullshit, you would actually look at it like I do as a giant success. In fact, any entrepreneur out there, small business owner for that matter, knows that you've got to take risk in order to realize success. And it's these small things in life that build to the big accomplishments. So failure is a part of the equation. I know this. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a small business owner. I run an organization known as AMTV, Alternative Media Television. Failure leads to success. You see, most people are afraid to fail. They're afraid of themselves because they've been indoctrinated by the machine. Now, a lot of this comes from the mainstream media, right? CNN, Fox, MSNBC. A lot of this comes from peer pressure of your peer group who's already been indoctrinated through the power of this machine and this propaganda campaign. Because they don't take risk, because they're fearful, because they won't start a business, because they won't do anything that might jeopardize their perfect existence, even though they don't.
I want to also add to that, they also manipulate others to be fearful to succeed because what it might mean for the way they live their life, or, you know, they'll get certain people where they're afraid to succeed. But back to the clip.
Realize a lot of them are enslaved through this mind control that makes up this propaganda web and mess that it truly is. Will tell you that you can't do certain things. Or if you do fail, want to point it out and highlight it and then ignore your success. The same thing that the mainstream media is doing right now with Donald Trump. A lot of this comes from the educational system. You know, the educational system here in the United States is geared to create loyal slaves. Honestly, it's created to create employees. It's instituted, it's an institution, there's a reason for that and why they use that term, so that you become obedient, not just to major companies and corporations that will employ you as that input, really just a battery cell to their massive multi-billionaire behemoth machines that they're now outsourcing jobs overseas because they no longer need you, but also so that you can be obedient to the government. All of this creates a world of obedience and slavery. Same thing with the debt system, same thing with banking. Same thing with the Federal Reserve System today. Same thing with mortgages and car payments and credit card debt. All of this created to control you and enslave you through the new model of slavery. You see, we've gone from the traditional chains where they're readily apparent to this new form of slavery. You know, people like Ron Paul talked a lot about this, right? They talked a lot about the Federal Reserve, for example, and about how this not just enslaves citizens of the United States, this private criminal institution, but it enslaves the rest of the world because their policies, their 0% interest rates, their funny money printing of quantitative easing, et cetera, only creates more instability and massive instability, arguably, not just here in the United States, but around the world. It raises commodity prices. It creates bubbles. We see these giant fluctuations in pricing, whether or not, again, it's with food going up and down, it's with energy going up and down. Notice how we're at a trough now, or it's anything for that matter. But all of it is a tool of control. It's all a part of this indoctrination web and system. I mean, you can't even watch a sporting event now, basketball, football, which is another form of propaganda in and of itself, entertainment, Hollywood, etc., without being a part of that commercial that makes up America, or being sold something, a brand new car or a new outfit or even a retirement plan. You're being sold the idea that if you work today, you can do what you really want to do later on in your life. What a crock of shit. Honestly, I woke up to that really early in life. I was like, man, that's a crock of shit. No way in hell am I going to work my entire life so that when I'm 65 and I'm walking around in one of these rockers, I'm going to really live my dreams then. That is the lie that the establishment sells you, so you work for them. And so, they're picking on Trump right now, but they're picking on all of us. And I think that there is this consciousness awareness rising. I think this is changing. I think I see it actually within the millennial generation, although there's still a great portion indoctrinated in that commercial society, et cetera. We're all guilty of it. But I do see a little bit of a consciousness awareness in this area. I see a lot of more people freelancing now, which I think is incredible. I think is amazing. I see a lot of people trying to start their own businesses, to be that entrepreneur, to declare independence from this control model and this system, which again is geared and engineered to enslave us for a reason. All of this tied together through the head that makes up the mainstream media, arguably the most powerful entity on earth, in my opinion, followed by the government and these corporations that own the media, so that you work for the man, so that you're basically in this circular world where you never really get anywhere. Again, all of this a part of our own indoctrination. So the question is, how do we break free of this? How do we perceive the world differently than we currently do? Now, I've done quite a bit of content recently because this is a big part of my life. Perception is your reality. You dictate your own success. However you envision your future is exactly what it becomes. Really, opportunities are limitless. It's a product and byproduct of your imagination and your own mind. So if you believe you're going to be successful, if you believe that you're going to make $1 million, you'll make $1 million, but you won't make $1 billion. If you believe you're going to be a billionaire, you will be a billionaire. If you believe you want to be a trillionaire, you're going to be a trillionaire, and that encompasses who you are, you could be the first trillionaire on planet Earth. Arguably, we've already got some trillionaires in the Rockefellers and some of these other elitist Rothschild families. But you set your own limits is the point here. It takes a while for a lot of us, and it took me a while a little bit as well, coming through the modern educational system, attending both private and public school before you break free and realize you've been indoctrinated, that you've literally been a part of this machine that doesn't empower you, but enslaves you. You learn how to take tests, for example, in college. You learn how to be a good exam taker, to take notes, but not really think for yourself. It's far more practical to be an apprentice in most careers nowadays, or actually learn from somebody who's an expert in their field with hands-on experience. That's 10 times better, I would argue, than some people get in the quote-unquote college experience where they drop several $100,000, then get out, can't find a job, and have no idea who they are. But again, your perception is your reality. We all set our own limits, and we can break free from the propaganda machine that makes up this corporate giant, that makes up the federal government, not just here in the States, but abroad in this new world order system that they're creating on the behalf of and benefit of them. I mean, it's why there's such a giant wealth gap. Bernie Sanders talks about this. This is why the top 0.01% rule over the rest of the world, because all of us are working for them. I mean, the same thing goes for digital media right now. Matt Drudge has talked about how it's just a bunch of digital ghettos. Whether or not it's Google that owns YouTube, or it's Facebook, or it's Twitter, or it's Instagram, all these other companies, part of one unit, or it's Amazon. These are the digital ghettos. And the digital ghetto has all of us working for the man, all of us working for them. So how do we break free from that mold? How do we transition to a more enlightened state? A lot of the times you have to ignore your peers, quite honestly, because your peers are indoctrinated. You have to ignore that negative energy. You have to be singularly focused. For example, when I first started AMTV, there was a lot of negative resistance because I was trying something new. From family, from friends, from colleagues, couldn't understand what I was doing, said I was doomed to fail, etc. You're making a mistake. And it was actually the best thing I've ever done for myself. But I was very singularly focused throughout the entire journey, and I am today. You've got to trust yourself. You've got to trust your instincts. And importantly, you have to have a vision. I think a lot of the self-help gurus talk about this, whether or not it's Tony Robbins or it's anybody else. And again, your perception is your reality. You have to have a clear vision. You have to understand that we are all a part of this indoctrinated system. There's a part of this matrix, and you have to break free from it. Realize that we can do as human beings extraordinary things. Realize that you, tuning in, are absolutely extraordinary. That you bring with you incredible strengths and weaknesses that make you unique. I always say, focus on your strengths, not your weakness. Focus on a specific niche and be the best at it. Be so good that you can't be ignored. Be so great that your haters will ask you if you're hiring at some point in the future. Honestly, you have to have a clear vision. You have to have a singular focus for what you want to accomplish. I think when you realize that, when you see the world, as I do, and I say this from a very humble position, the world today is an illusion. The system they've created for us is illusory. When you understand that secret, that we've all been pre-programmed, we've all been indoctrinated, we've all been brainwashed, you understand that the economic system, the Federal Reserve, is an illusion, that money comes from nothing. Absolutely nowhere. That's the truth. You understand that a lot of what most people are thinking has already been pre-programmed in their minds. That's the secret. You understand you can create your own reality. You understand that you can create anything from nothing, whatever that might be. When you have a clear vision of something, when you see yourself doing something in the future, it becomes your reality. I see this time and time again in my own life, whether or not it's personally or it's in business. I'll give you an example. I had a vision that I would fly in a private plane. This was earlier last year. And I don't have the means to fly a private plane. It's very expensive to do that. But I had this vision that I'd be flying private. I really didn't know where it came from, but I saw myself on that private jet. And it turns out a couple months later, I attended a charity event for a very good cause for children here in the Valley of the Sun, kids, and I won the grand prize. And guess what the grand prize was? A private jet. And so I flew in a private jet for the first time just about a month ago. I had a clear vision. I saw it in my head. Somehow that energy that was put out into the world came back to me. And it happens more than most people think. A lot of people attend these seminars and they think it's all hokey. That Tony Robbins is just a charlatan. No. There's a secret to his success. There's a secret to people that understand that the current reality is an illusion. And when you understand that, you can bend, just like the Matrix, the movie showed us, you can bend that matrix. You can bend it at your will. Perception is your reality. What you think about is what you manifest. And it is absolutely true because, again, I've seen it personally. And this is coming from a very humble place in my own life. I see it time and time again. So the mainstream media is trying to bring down Donald Trump right now because, again, we know the establishment doesn't want him, right? They're trying to bring down his campaign manager. They're trying to focus on all of his unsuccessful business ventures where he's failed, his bankruptcies. A guy like me looks at that and honestly says, go Trump. That's why you're successful, because he's not afraid to take massive risks. He's not afraid to fail. Most millionaires in our society have declared bankruptcy. You do realize that, right? I forget the actual statistic on it, but most of the most successful business people, millionaires, multimillionaires in our society today, in America and abroad, have failed multiple times before they ever hit it big. But the important thing was they weren't afraid to try. They weren't afraid to go against the current. And that's something I also think we have to keep in mind, is that usually that's where the best opportunities are, when you're swimming against the current of the masses. You're going the other way from all the cows. I saw this in social media, for example, when I started AMTV, because I've always had a passion for media and I wanted to start something special that has since grown into AMTV today. I started doing what I'm doing, and I started making videos on YouTube and our own platform and building our website before it was popular. In fact, it was actually kind of shamed because it was completely against the current. It was counterculture. Well, everyone was going this way, I was going that way. You know, we even see it with some of Donald Trump's unsuccessful attempts at business. In fact, he started a mortgage company right before the crash of the real estate market. I think it was in 2007, and then they quickly went out of business even before the peak and inevitable crash. Again, you want to go against the current when nobody else is going that direction. You want to be the first mover on opportunities. You don't want to be the third guy, fourth, fifth, sixth guy getting in. Again, a lot of real estate agents tried to do this, mortgage officers, et cetera. Even Donald Trump tried to do this in 2007 and failed because he wasn't a first mover. He was going with the herd. So I think a question for all of us to ask now, I think you should ask, whatever business that you're in, whatever you do personally, in your personal family life and professionally, is where's the herd now? Where is everybody going? Where do you want to go? What do you see? What is your vision for the future? What do you want your life to be? Maybe it's a family-focused life. Maybe that's really what you care about. You want to raise your family. You want to spend more time with them. You don't want that 9 to 5. I encourage you to make that happen. You make that your reality. You see that with a clear vision, and you achieve that. You accomplish that. Have a singular focus, and don't listen to anybody else. Don't listen to any of your detractors. Again, be so good that you can't be ignored. Be so great that even your haters in the future will ask you if you're hiring. I'm serious about this. I've seen this even in my own life, in my own professional life. People knocking on my door that years ago didn't even understand what we do. I'm sure you have examples of that. We have to understand that there's extreme power in ourselves. There's extreme power in our minds, the energy that we put out into the world. And again, we manifest our own reality. We manifest our own destiny, and we can achieve and accomplish anything that we truly put our mind to. But you have to believe in yourself. And it also has to be a natural part of who you are. Again, focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. Someone will say, well, Christopher, can I become a ballet dancer then if I want to? Just out of the blue? My question to you would be, does it feel natural? If it does, yes, you can become a professional ballet dancer. You could be in the NBA, even if you're not 7 feet tall, if it feels natural to you. If you ask that same question, say, no, it doesn't feel natural to me to be a ballet dancer, well then no, you won't be a ballet dancer. Or you won't be in the NBA. I'd like to hear some of your personal stories today, in your personal life and in business. Maybe where you've seen yourself manifest your own destiny and your own reality through a clear vision and that perception being your reality. Again, this illusory environment that makes up the indoctrination of the masses today in that transition to true rebirth and enlightenment. Or maybe you're struggling with this right now, and I also want to hear that. And I'll comment and respond to your question in the comment box below. Maybe you're struggling with where you're currently at and you want to go somewhere different. You want to change your life. Maybe a little, maybe dramatically. I'd like to help all of you get there. I would like you to help you realize whatever vision that you have. I think we should build upon our success here. I think we all should. I think we should change the world. That sounds optimistic. It sounds maybe a little bit utopic, but I think we can if we want to. We shape the world around us. We transform our own reality. We manifest our destiny, all through the power of this. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere. Make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor. Peace.
AMTV, Christopher Green. And, I've tried to make this point many of times. In my own words, basically the same thing, that you have to follow your passion. You have to go out there. Again, don't be brainwashed into fearing the success. Don't be brainwashed into fearing failure. They will try to brainwash. They don't want you to succeed because as long as you're not coming up, you are a servant. And that's what they want. And, I urge a lot of people, definitely people around me, to follow their passion. And I think that's just so lost on any type of teaching nowadays about you have to be, just because you're good at math doesn't mean you need to become a math musician. Your passion might be something not exactly related to math, but math is a part of it, maybe, or maybe not. But you have a passion that you are good at, and it's a passion. You might be great at math, but you still hate it. You don't like math, even though you're good at it. I'm kind of one of those people. Pretty good at math, not a genius or nothing, but I'm good at math. Don't like it. Don't like sitting there doing math equations. Not my cup of tea. So it's, we have schools going, well, you're good in this. This is what you need to follow. You need to be passionate about this. Well, I'm not passionate about it. Well, you need to get passionate about it because that's what you're good at. Well, I'm good. No, look at your tests. You're a genius in it. I really hate that, though. Oh, no, too bad. That's what you're good at. That's what you need to do. And, we have this in our school systems, too. It's you follow what you're good at, not what you're passionate about. They don't teach you to be good at what you're passionate about. That should become secondary, a hobby. But if you see some of the most successful people, they've garnered success, maybe not right away, but they got their success because they followed something they were passionate about and were good at it. And a lot of it comes down to hard work. Again, don't let them have you fearing to go out and do things. I ain't got no money. Go out and do it. Every time someone, you tell them, well, you want to do that, then do it. Well, I can't do that. Do it. It's one of those things. You're coming up with an excuse. And as long as you have that mental attitude that, well, this is my passion. I love doing it. I won't make money at it. But, well, there's your but. You're going to be on your butt because you keep coming up with the buts. And, it's hard to explain that to people because there's a lot of people that they don't have a whole bunch to lose. They have more to lose by not following that passion than they do by following. They're not going to lose anything that's going to be that significant. It's not like they're working a, 10-hour day, 6 days a week to keep their bills paid in their mansion. There's people out there that really, they have one of the best opportunities and they're not grabbing the bull by the horns. And it aggravates me sometimes. And, I've seen people out there that they got a kid, but they don't really have a lot to offer their kid. Well, you have opportunities to offer things to the kid, but you're taking the easy route. I can offer a little bit to my kid and have this fallacy of a safety net, which a lot of people learn that safety net's not really there when, our market took a crash in '08. So that safety net's an illusion. But you work for minimal thinking, well, this minimal will always be here. The opportunity for minimal will always be there. Your exact job may not. You have opportunities. You have a passion. You have a talent. You have to get the mental state to be able to follow that. Otherwise, you're going to keep coming up with excuses and buts, and you're not going to succeed. And again, that's indoctrination. We have been indoctrinated this way. When I was growing up, grandparents, go get you that good factory job with that pension and 401k and all this good stuff. Shoot, time I was at a working age, there wasn't no place giving out pensions anymore. The opportunity for all these pensions weren't there. Most of the factories, even the ones that, one of my grandparents worked at one factory, well, they're still around, but guess what? They don't have pensions. Just recently cut his pension, which I told him it would happen. I don't think he believed me, but it happened. So it's one of those things that you have to break those bonds and chains that hold you down. And a lot of it's mental. A lot of it's brainwashing. A lot of people don't understand how deep that goes. Now to kind of go on to something that was kind of related to freedom, freeing yourself out of the fallacy. But what about economic freedom? I got one here from Foundation for Economic Education. This one from Jeffrey Tucker. Again, what is economic freedom? 5 indispensable principles. Quite often when I am interviewed, I get the question, what precisely do you mean by capitalism? It's an excellent question. The great debate among capitalism, fascism, and socialism suffers from lack of clear language. For example, the lackluster growth in the United States and Europe has prompted countless pundits to declare a crisis of capitalism. It's been more than a century since governments let these economies grow on their own without bludgeoning them with regulations, taxing, and looting the public. Littering financial systems with paper money, cartelizing producers, shoveling welfare, prohibiting and hobbling a huge range of production and consumption, prohibiting labor exchanges, and funding gigantic public works. The legal and economic arrangements that transformed the U.S. and Europe in the 19th century are long gone, replaced early in the 20th century by large and growing governments that recognized no limits to their power. This is a terrible reality that no remaining candidate for president even dares question. To be sure, some advocates of market liberty believe that the term capitalism should be jettisoned permanently because it causes confusion. People might think that you favor using the state to back big business, capital against labor, or using public policy in a way that supports prominent producers over consumers. Some people like to distinguish between capitalism and crony capitalism, which I've done that multiple times, or corporatism, which is another term for crony capitalism. For example, many American retailers these days are hoping for an increase in tariffs and import quotas in a way that will protect their products against foreign competition. That is, they want us to use government power to guarantee their profits. It seems to me that this is better described as pure cronyism. Leave the capitalism part out of it. In a term, if a term elucidates an idea with accuracy, great. If it causes confusion, change it. Language is constantly evolving. No particular arrangement of letters embeds an immutable meaning. And what is at stake in this debate about market freedom or capitalism or laissez-faire or the free market is of profound importance. It's the substance, not the words, we should care about. Here are 5 more elements of this idea of market freedom, or whatever you want to call it. It is my short summary of the classical liberal version of the free society and its functioning, which isn't just about economics, but the whole life itself. Call it capitalism if you want to. Now, he wants to kind of get away from maybe capitalism, maybe not, but he does use classical liberal term, which many people don't talk about being liberal if you're a freedom-loving person, because liberal today is not classical liberalism. Classical liberalism believed in the individual liberties or freedoms. But number one, volition. Markets are about human choice at every level of society. These choices extend to every sector and every individual. You can choose your work. No one can force you into labor. At the same time, you can't impose yourself on any employer. No one can force you to buy anything, but neither can you force someone to sell to you. Choice means agreement between all those parties to the exchange. The right of choice recognizes the infinite diversity within the human family, whereas a state policy has to assume people are interchangeable units. Now, I kind of want to go back to the first part, the first paragraph. It says, choice means agreement between all those parties to the exchange. No one can force you to buy anything, but neither can you force someone to sell to you. Well, what do we have the state trying to do now? Oh, well, you have to provide wedding cakes. You have to provide service. If you decide to get into any type of business, then you are required to provide that service, which isn't the truth. Okay, back to some people feel a calling to lead lives of prayer and contemplation in a community of religious believers. Others have a talent for managing high-risk hedge funds. Others favor the arts or accounting or any profession or calling that you can imagine. Whatever your calling, you are free to pursue. Anything peaceful, as Leonard Reed, the founder of FEE, liked to say. You are the chooser, but in your relations with others, agreement is the watchword. This implies maximum freedom for everyone in society. It also implies a maximum role for what are called civil liberties. It means freedom of speech, freedom to consume, freedom to buy and sell, freedom to advertise, freedom to hire someone who once lived on the other side of the national border, and so on. No one's set of choices is legally privileged over others. Number two, ownership. In a world of infinite abundance, there would be no need for ownership. But as long as we live in the material world, there will be potential conflicts over scarce resources. These conflicts can be resolved through fighting over things or through the recognition of property rights. If we prefer peace over war, volition over violence, productivity over poverty, all scarce resources without exception need private owners. Everyone can use his or her property in any peaceful way. There are no accumulation mandates or limits on accumulation. Society cannot declare anyone too rich nor prohibit voluntary. That's good. I can't even speak right now. By declaring anyone too poor. At no point can anyone take what is yours without your permission. You can reassign ownership rights to heirs after you die. Socialism is not really an option in the material world. There can be no collective ownership of anything materially scarce. One or another faction will assert control in the name of society. Inevitably, the faction will be the most powerful in society. That is the state. This is why all attempts to create socialism in scarce goods or service devolve into totalitarian systems of top-down planning, planned chaos, Mises called it. Number three, cooperation. Volition and ownership grant the right to anyone to live in a state of pure autarky. On the other hand, that won't get you very far. You will be poor and your life will be short. People need to obtain a better life. We trade to our mutual benefit. we cooperate and work. We develop every form of association with each other, commercial, family, fraternal, and religious. The lives of all of us are improved by our capacity to cooperate in some form with other people. In a society based on volition, ownership, and cooperation, networks of human association develop across time and space, and especially across national borders, to create the complexities of the social and economic order. No one is the master of anyone else. If we want to succeed in life, we come to value serving each other in the best ways we can. Business serve consumers, managers serve employees, just as employees serve businesses. A free society is a society of extended friendship. It is a society of service and benevolence. Four, learning. No one is born into this world knowing much of anything. We learn from our parents and our teachers, but more importantly, we learn from the infinite bits of information that come to us every instant of the day, all throughout our lives. We observe success and failure in others, and we are free to accept or reject these lessons as we see fit. In a free society, we are free to emulate others, accumulate and apply wisdom, read and absorb ideas, and extract information from any source to adapt for our own uses. All the information we come across in our lives, provided it's obtained coercively, is a free good, not subject to limits of scarcity, because it is infinitely copyable. You can own it, and you can own it, or I can own it, and everyone can own it without limit and without depletion. Here we find the socialist side of the capitalist system. The receipts or recipes for success and failure are everywhere and available for the taking. This is why the very notion of intellectual property is inimical to freedom. It always implies coercing people and thereby violating the principles of volition and authentic ownership and cooperation. Number 5, competition. When people think of capitalism, competition is perhaps the first idea that comes to mind, but that idea is widely misunderstood. It doesn't mean that there must be several suppliers of every good or service, or that there must be a certain number of producers of anything. It only means that there should be no legal, coercive limits on ways in which we are permitted to serve each other, and there really are infinite ways in which this can take place. In sports, competition has a goal to win. Competition has a goal in the market economy too. Service to the consumer through ever-increasing degrees of excellence. This excellence can come from providing better and cheaper products or services, or from providing innovations that meet people's needs better than existing products or services. It doesn't mean killing the competition. It means striving to do a better job than anyone else. Every competitive act is a risk, a leap into an unknown future. Whether the judgment was right or wrong is ratified by the system of profit and loss, which are signals that serve as objective measures of whether resources are being used wisely or not. These signals are derived from price established freely on the market, which is to say that they reflect prior agreements among choosing individuals. Unlike in sports, there is no endpoint to the competition. It is a process that never ends. There is no final winner. There is an ongoing rotation of excellence among the players, and anyone can join the game provided they go about it peacefully. Summary. There we have it. Volition, ownership, cooperation, learning, and competition. That is capitalism as I understand it. As described in the liberal tradition, improved by many great thinkers in the course of the 20th and 21st centuries, it is not a system so much as a social setting for all times and places that favor human flourishing. It's not hard to discern my political outlook, and it fits with these pillars I'm for it. If it does not, I'm against it. Now you can tell me, is the crisis in the U.S. and Europe really a crisis of capitalism? On the contrary, an authentic liberalism capitalism is the solution to the greatest crisis facing the world today. Classic liberalism. Again, that was by Jeffrey Tucker at FEE.org, Foundation for Economic Education. And the title of that article, again, what is economic freedom? Okay, if I can get this article pulled up fast enough, we'll be able to cover it. Just take me a second here. Of course, my browser wants to act up. Okay. Now I get the website up now if I can get the article to load. Do. This was from thefreethoughtproject.com. Bill grants churches the power to make soldiers of God who can legally kill citizens like cops. As if police officers kidnapping, beating, and killing innocent people in America with impunity wasn't enough, the state of Mississippi just passed a bill that would grant churches equal protections from acts of violence. Mississippi House Bill 786, the Mississippi Church Protection Act, legalizes killing people while acting as a participant of a church or place of worship. Seriously? According to the bill, its purpose is to amend Section 97-3-15 Mississippi Code 1972 to provide that killing a person while acting as a participant of a church or place of worship security team is justifiable homicide and for related purposes. The Coalition for America calls House Bill 786 the worst state bill in America. The Mississippi Church Protection Act would allow churches to empower designated members of their congregation as part of a security team with a shoot-to-kill authority equivalent to a police officer, but with less government oversight. The bill contains few restrictions regarding where one may act within this capacity, allowing a church's volunteer security personnel to exercise this authority in public and private venues outside the church. The bill passed the Mississippi House in February, and on Wednesday the Senate approved it, making one minor amendment. It is now scheduled to go back to the House, where it will then find its way back to the governor's desk. The bill legally recognizes actual soldiers of Christ and grants them power to kill. What's more, there is no justification for granting churches extra rights that other citizens do not have, nor is it for law enforcement or politicians. Just want to throw that in there. By passing this bill, the state of Mississippi effectively recognizes churches as their own sovereign entities. Many states that are tax-free and immune from their acts of violence carried out in their official duties. Quote, the Mississippi Church of Protection Act is well deserving of the title for worst state bill. This legislation would put soldiers of God above the law, allowing them to act as judge, jury, and executioner, said Larry T. Decker, executive director of the Secular Coalition for America. Religious institutions are already exempt from taxation. financial transparency, and many civil rights laws. The Mississippi Church Protection Act would constitute an unprecedented and dangerous next step. Belonging to a church should not afford anyone the same rights and protections as law enforcement, nor should it. For law enforcement, people hate how they don't put that in there. This legislation emboldens extremists by creating a legal mean for radical preachers to enlist their congregants into God's army. Now let me spin that around. So people at the top in government telling the people lower, like law enforcement, to do something. Hold on. This legislation emboldens extremism by creating a legal means for radical preachers to enlist their congregants. Well, let's replace preachers with top officials in government and congregants into law enforcement. And instead of God's army, call it government's army. Bam. Sorry, had to just throw that in their face a little bit. But you can read that one at the Free Thought Project. And this stuff can get scary. Now, you might go, well, did a good Christian? Well, maybe there's not always good Christians or good churches. Or, hey, what about other religions? This wasn't just something for Christians. Basically, let's think maybe Sharia law, the extremist type versions of Sharia law. But this literally could give immunity for religious war. You get two churches killing each other and you're giving them immunity? Sounds like that might not be the smartest idea. But hey, it's government. Smart ideas from government, smart ideas to them are only things that benefit them and tend to make things worse for you. I know we're coming up to the broadcast here. Okay. That was again from Free Thought Project. Articles, InfoWars, Truth in Media, AMTV, We Are Change. Go check all those out. FEE.org. Check out Jeffrey Tucker, too. We're at the point in this country, I think, where we're going to have to just really live free. We can't rely on anyone to give us our freedoms. We kind of have to take them back. And again, local level is where you have to start. You have to start in your home. You have to start in your community. You have to start in your state. And we have to spread the idea of freedom. And when you share information like some of the articles I brought up here today, it opens people's mind. Doesn't mean that it might change their mind, but it might make them look at things different. Maybe eventually it'll change their mind and they won't even know that's what initiated that whole rethinking how they look at things. Because a lot of us, we might have had a feeling, but we weren't positive of what was that feeling? Why do we feel that way? What don't we know? What are we being lied to about? And the more you awaken to it, I think there's so many stages to becoming aware. And